Okay, you probably can't hear me over the air conditioner, but it's hot in here. Today was my first day back at work. First day of school for high school teachers, my school district. So I was gonna shoot a vlog for this whole week in which I talked about what I was reading and, you know, first week of school without kids, which by the way is just not really like working if you're a teacher, at least not for me. I mean, there are things I have to do and work I have to get done, but there are no kids, so it's not the actual work. But usually, you know, this week has a tendency to make me grumpy, kind of old and grouchy anyway, and, you know, having to go back to work after 2.5 months of not being at work, I know, always makes me feel a little grumpy. Not that I don't enjoy teaching kids or I don't like my job. I actually love my job, but I don't love it as much probably as doing whatever I want to do. So I was going to make a vlog, and I thought, well, you're just going to be grouchy and complain the whole time in your vlog. And I said, well, that's probably true. So what I thought I'd do instead of making a vlog is that I would do my video for the Thomas Covenant, the Chronicles of Thomas Covenant read-along that I'm involved in with Steve Donoghue and Jen from Remembered Reads and Joe from Joseph Francis Burton, and I believe Mark from Richardson Reads. I believe we're all doing the Chronicles of Thomas Covenant read-along. This was a fantasy series that was published in the late 70s, early 80s, involving a main character named Thomas Covenant. Last month we read Lord Falsbane, which is the first book in the first Chronicles of Thomas Covenant. This month's book was the Illearth War, which is the second book in the first Chronicles of Thomas Covenant. So if you read Lord Falsbane, or if you watched that video, then you probably know that Thomas Covenant is a character who lives in what I'm going to call the real world, our world, who is magically transported to a magical fantasy style world called the Land, which owes a lot of its references, people, geography, to the work of J.R.R. Tolkien, of course. And in that world, Thomas Covenant had been summoned by an evil force to essentially help the people of the land defeat another evil force, so that the evil force that summoned, the main evil force could eventually destroy the people of the land and, you know, for whatever reason he wanted to, you know, exert his evil dominion over the land. Covenant is given a mission by Lord Fowl, the evil figure who wants to exert his dominion over the land, to take to the lords of the land who live in a place called Revelstone. These lords have been studying this kind of ancient lore which gives them magical powers and lets them understand earth forces and things like that. And Thomas Covenant is supposed to deliver to them a message that they only have 49 years before Lord Fowl essentially is strong enough to take over and destroy them. Covenant hates being in the land, even though the land essentially heals his leprosy. In the real world, Thomas Covenant is a leper, and he has learned to survive his leprosy by constantly scanning his body for cuts, nicks, and health, and being hyper aware of his physical situation at all times. When he's transported to the land, he is convinced that he is involved in some kind of a dream, maybe a dream he's having in a coma, and he decides that if he gives in to accepting the reality of this dream, that's going to make him lax when he gets back to the real world in how he takes care of himself. To me, that is a logical flaw, but that's the conceit on which Thomas Covenant's character is built. So Covenant in the land is just a complete bastard. Number one, he rapes a young teenage girl named Lena, who was the first person he met in the land, and the first person who helped her. He doesn't just rape her, he violently beats her and rapes her. So we have a main character who is, in fact, a rapist, and not a particularly apologetic rapist. He feels bad about it, but he always makes excuses for himself. And on top of that, he has come to the land with a ring made out of white gold. The people of the land believes have extraordinary powers which they can use to defeat Lord Fowl. So he goes to Revelstone, he meets with the lords of the land, and he essentially is no help at all. He ends up going on a quest to get the staff of law away from another evil figure, and inadvertently he does things that help that quest be successful, but not willingly, not happily, and he's just really a jerk to everybody the whole time, on top of the fact that he raped a young girl. Anyway, the first mission succeeds. The Lord of the Land get the Staff of Law away from the secondary evil creature named Drool Rockworm. And as soon as Drool Rockworm, who summoned Covenant in the first place, is dead, Covenant goes back to our world. So the second book picks up with Covenant back in our world, still living with leprosy, and yet constantly making decisions to put himself in physical danger, even though when he's in the land he refuses to take action because he's afraid when he's back home that would mean that he didn't take enough care of his physical danger and the situations he was in. You see why I don't think this makes sense. He behaves irrationally in our world and hyper-rationally in the other world. Anyway, so Covenant's back in the real world. Of course, he has an accident. He is summoned once again to the land. This time he's summoned by the new High Lord of Revelstone. Her name is Elena, and she summons him because 40 years have gone by in the land, and they are only, what, 7-9 years away from Lord Fowl being able to destroy them utterly and his prophecy coming true. She summons Covenant back in the hopes that he can help. And despite the fact that the people of the land are always kind to him, always accepting of them, believe that he has power and he's going to do something important, he's still an absolute jerk. He just is. He still refuses to accept the reality, even though it's the second time he's done it. He still refuses to try, really, to do anything to make the power of the white gold ring he wears useful to the lords of the land, and he's just still a jerk. The good news is the Illearth War is a much better book than Lord Fowl's Bane, and I think it's a better book because we don't have to spend a lot of time with Thomas Covenant because he's a jerk. He's in the very first part of the book, and he's in the very last part of the book, and he's really not in the middle part of the book, which is a relief. The middle part of the book, and the biggest part of the book, follows another character who comes from our world. His name in the land is Hyle Troy, and Hyle Troy has been summoned to the land by the mother of the young woman that Covenant raped. She apparently tried to re-summon Covenant, perhaps to have her revenge on him, and she made a mistake and summoned someone else instead. The lords of the land eventually, however they came to this conclusion, put Hyle Troy in charge of their military, which ends up being a good thing because Lord Fowl's armies are ready to attack. And so most of the middle part of the book is essentially the story of how Hyle Troy deals with fighting Lord Fowl's incredibly huge, terrifying army. And unlike Covenant, Troy embraces the land. He accepts its reality. He is kind, open, generous to the people. He earns their trust. He wants to do everything he can to help them, and so we get to see kind of a much more positive, heroic character doing whatever he can to help the lords of the land be successful. There are a number of large set-piece battle scenes and chapters involving battles and real action scenes that I think are really well done and make the book much better than the first book. In addition to Troy embracing the land and everything it stands for and accepting its reality, he is disdainful and dislikes Thomas Covenant. And in that case, to me, he stands in for the rest of us who sees Covenant for essentially being the jerk that I think he is. So I enjoyed the section about Hyle Troy and all of that. Unfortunately, the book again has to end with Thomas Covenant. He's gone off with High Lord Elena to try to find this 7th ward of lore left behind by the High Lord King Kevin, who used his massive power and knowledge to destroy the land, essentially to prevent Lord Fowl from taking over. And Lord Fowl's been working his way back ever since. And Lord Kevin hid these 7 wards of power that will teach the High Lords everything they need to know to defeat Lord Fowl. So it comes about in this book that the 7th ward of power, or part of the lore of Lord Kevin, can be obtained. I won't go into how that comes about, because it's a fairly involved story, which I'll be honest with you, doesn't always make a lot of sense to me. But anyway, High Lord Elena goes off and she takes Covenant with her to try to find this thing, convinced that when push comes to shove, Covenant will use the power of the white gold ring that he wears to help her achieve this goal of finding this 7th ward of knowledge left by Lord Kevin. In the meantime, She more or less confesses her love for Thomas Covenant, and that she has the hots for him, and she's interested in him as a love interest and in a sexual way. This is really creepy because Thomas Covenant is, of course, her father. Elena is the daughter of Lena, the young girl that he raped, and it is his own daughter who he frequently finds himself in romantic situations with. He realizes it's his daughter, and he's able to prevent himself from engaging in sexual activity with his own daughter, even though she explains to him why that would be okay. This is creepy and cringy as all hell. There's no way around it. It's just creepy and cringy. And I think the best thing Thomas Covenant does in the first 2 books is, even though he wants to, he doesn't follow his impulses to actually have sex with his own daughter, or to become romantically interested in his own daughter. He does, though, out of sexual frustration and confusion, strike her, because that's what Thomas Covenant does to women in these books who confront him with powers and put him in situations where he is uncomfortable. He inevitably hits them and or rapes them, which means that Thomas Covenant is just a jerk. Anyway, he and the High Lord Elena go off to find the 7th Ward. They, of course, find it. Come to find out, it was a mistake for Elena to find this 7th Ward. She gets into a lot of trouble by trying to resurrect High Lord Kevin to help her defeat Lord Fowl. Instead, she has to fight the former High Lord Kevin, and Covenant and his white gold ring are, as usual, absolutely useless. The book ends, of course, with Covenant going back to our world, which suggests that, of course, High Lord Elena has died, because according to Lord Fowl's Bane, when the person who summoned you dies, you return back to your world. Well, I sense a plot hole here, because according to the Illearth War, the person who summoned Hyle Troy was Lena's mother, who dies, and yet Hyle Troy remains in the land. Anyway, if you're getting the impression I'm not particularly enjoying reading these books, well, that's really not the right impression. I'm enjoying reading them, but part of my enjoyment in reading them is, I think, an enjoyment of realizing in some ways how bad Donaldson is as a writer, how flawed this plot is, how uncomfortable it is. If Stephen Donaldson, the author of these books, has one great achievement, it is, I think, in creating perhaps the least likely, or the least likable, least admirable hero of a set of fantasy novels ever. Now, I don't read a lot of fantasy. There may be more dislikable people than Thomas Covenant who are the heroes of these fantasy novels, but my goodness, I don't like him. I'm hoping in the 3rd book, which I believe is titled The Power That Preserves, which we'll be reading next month, he will be better and do something more useful and be a better person, but I have my doubts. Anyway, I will leave links to the other people's videos in the show notes down below so you can see everybody else's video. Steve Donoghue is doing a weekly read-along video. I hope that you'll watch the last one of those, which should be out after my video comes out. And if you're reading along with these and you disagree with anything I said about Thomas Covenant or the books or anything like that, please talk to me about it in the comments. I had a really great discussion with somebody about my hatred for Thomas Covenant, how I don't have any real sympathy or pity for him, and I really enjoyed that discussion. So please leave me a comment down below. As always, thank you for watching.